My cousin gave me her baby to raise. 15 years later, I found out my husband was the father. There is a special kind of humiliation that only really makes sense when your own kid helps confirm that you were just the wallet in your own house. And no, I am not being dramatic. I wish I were. If you were on my couch right now with a mug of something hot in your hands, this is exactly how I would tell it, because there is no polished way to package what happened around my living room, a broken tablet, and a very expensive party that turned into the most petty courtroom in town. My name is Corinne, and that night I was on the floor of the living room surrounded by cables, extension cords, and a mess of picture frames, trying to make a slideshow cute enough to justify the absurd amount of money I had poured into my kid's 15th birthday party. I was that kind of mother, you know? The one who remembers every baby photo, who saves every finger painting, who thinks a slideshow with embarrassing toddler pictures is how you show love. I had snacks getting cold in the kitchen, music half picked out, and my back already aching from moving furniture around by myself because my husband was stuck at the shop again. The tablet I needed for the slideshow was supposed to be charging on the coffee table. I picked it up, hit the power button, and nothing happened. No little logo, no beep, no light, just a black rectangle staring back at me like it was offended that I even tried. I pressed the buttons again, held them down, tried a different charger, tried the wall socket, tried the power strip. Nothing. I swear I could feel my blood pressure jump in real time. That tablet had years of photos, videos of first days of school, goofy clips of my son dancing in the kitchen, all the stuff I never synced because I kept telling myself I would do it next week. So I drove to a repair place in a strip mall and tried not to think about how much it was going to cost. The guy behind the counter looked at the tablet, poked it like he was greeting an old friend, and told me the motherboard was fried or the battery was dead or something that sounded expensive. I told him I needed it fixed before Saturday night. He quoted a price that made me flinch, added a rush fee on top, and I still paid because I was not about to cancel the sentimental part of the party. I handed over the tablet and half a paycheck and told myself that at least my son would have this memory, that he would know how much I cared. When I picked the tablet up the next afternoon, it was working like nothing had ever happened, which honestly felt personal. The repair guy handed it to me with a little flourish, like I should clap. I took it home, dropped onto the couch, kicked off my shoes, and unlocked it, ready to drag pictures into a slideshow app and cry over baby photos like an idiot. The home screen came up. Notifications lined up across the top. Just normal stuff. I tapped on the photo folder and started scrolling through, relieved. There he was in diapers, in a cheap superhero costume, with missing teeth and frosting on his face, asleep on my chest. Every version of the kid I thought was mine. Some notification pinged at the top from my cousin, and I flicked it away without thinking. Then another one came through, a little preview bar with her name and a line of text. I hesitated for about 3 seconds, then told myself it was probably just about the party, something to do with the decorations or one of the relatives. Except the preview line did not look like party talk. It said something like, "He keeps calling her the woman who raised him and it makes me sick. I do not know how much longer I can keep my mouth shut." I stared at the tablet like it had insulted me. It was the old tablet everyone used for streaming and homework. The one my son treated like his, but my husband had logged his messages into once and never logged out of. The smart thing to do would have been to exit, pretend I had not seen it, respect boundaries, all those grown-up things. But we both know that is not who I am. My thumb opened the message thread before my brain even finished forming the thought that maybe I should not. The thread popped up, old messages, recent ones, a whole running conversation between my husband and my cousin that I did not even know existed. It started a few months back. Little updates, inside jokes, photos of my son at family barbecues I had missed because I was working overtime at the shop. Then the tone shifted. My cousin had sent a long message about how he is acting distant with her again, and he keeps saying she is not his real mother. And I felt my stomach drop so fast I got dizzy. I scrolled, reading line after line about, "This arrangement is unsustainable," and "He deserves to know the truth." Then I hit the part where my own son, my kid who I had tucked in and argued with and grounded and hugged for 15 years, had typed out that he could not wait to leave that house and go live with his real parents. He said my husband and my cousin together felt like a real family, that they understood him, that I was just hired help with a bank account. He made a little joke about how at least they did not nag him about homework while working on car engines. My cousin replied with a heart emoji and some comment about how one day they would have their chance to do things right. I do not know how long I sat there scrolling. My hands were shaking so hard at one point I almost dropped the tablet. There were messages about how he was technically my cousin's son, how my husband was always his real father, how I had been so generous to raise him all these years, like I was a stranger who had signed up for a foster care program, instead of the woman who had rocked him through fevers and sat in emergency rooms and scrimped to buy him stupid sneakers and game controllers. They talked about me like I was a line item in a budget. The worst part, the thing that made my chest ache, was that none of this was technically new information. I knew my son was not mine biologically. That was never a secret. When he was a baby, my cousin had shown up with him in her arms and a whole sob story about not being ready, about needing to finish school, about not having support. My husband and I had been trying and failing to get pregnant for years by then, and we were the ones with a house and a steady income. We took him. I did the feedings and diaper changes and parent-teacher conferences. My cousin visited sometimes. My husband went all in on being the fun dad, and I told myself that families are made, not born. According to the messages, the family that mattered had never been the one with my name on the school forms. My husband was his biological father, not just in some distant abstract way, but in the most literal sense. My cousin and my husband had history I did not fully understand. They had decided, between the two of them, that I would be the one doing the boring parts of parenthood while they kept the fun pieces and the title. I was the stable paycheck, the ride, the appointment scheduler, the one who sat through homework and fevers, and in their heads he was always eventually going to come home to them when it suited them. There's a particular kind of rage that does not show on your face right away. I put the tablet down very carefully. I stood up. I walked into the kitchen and turned off the oven because I suddenly could not remember if I had left anything inside. Then I went back to the living room, picked up the tablet again, and started taking screenshots. Every time I saw the words real parents, or read them laughing about how hard it was to watch me think he was really mine, my thumb hit the screenshot button again. My fingers moved on autopilot while my brain replayed 15 years of my life like someone had just hit fast forward and mute at the same time. I could have confronted them right then, stormed into the shop, thrown the tablet at my husband, called my cousin in the middle of the night. That is probably what a lot of people would have done. It is not what I did. Maybe it is because I had already survived one pretty public humiliation earlier in my life, one that involved a mugshot and some very smug cops and a cell that smelled like bleach and fear. Maybe it is because I knew that if I exploded without a plan, they would twist it, call me unstable, dangerous, dramatic. They already thought that, apparently. So I took a breath, wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, and did something that did not feel like me at all. I called my old public defender. Back when I was younger and a lot more stupid, I got into a bar fight that went way too far. There were drinks, there was an ex, there was a woman who pushed all the right buttons to make me see red. Someone called the police, I ended up in cuffs. And suddenly I was face to face with the legal system in a way I never wanted to repeat. The only reason I did not end up with a record that ruined my life was because a tired, sharp, overworked public defender sat across from me in a tiny room and told me I was going to shut up, follow her instructions, and get another chance. She did not sugarcoat anything, but she fought for me. Years later, she left that job and opened her own private practice in a bigger city. We kept in touch loosely, a card at the holidays, a quick message when my shop expanded. I knew she was busy and successful now, that her time did not come cheap. But I also knew she was the only person I trusted not to tell me to calm down when I said I wanted out. She picked up on the third ring, and as soon as she said my name, my throat closed. I somehow managed to tell her I needed help and that it was urgent. She told me to come in the next morning, early, so I went. I left my husband a note about running errands and lied to myself that this was still just gathering information. Sitting in her office, with its nice furniture and degrees on the wall, I laid everything out. The tablet, the screenshots, the backstory about my cousin dropping a baby into my arms all those years ago. I told her about the party, the slideshow, the way my son looked at me lately like I was an annoying chore. I listened to my own voice get flatter and flatter as I talked, like I was describing someone else's life. She listened without interrupting, just tapping her pen on the pad and staring at a random spot on the wall. Then she said, very calmly, that my whole life in that house had been built on a lie I had relied on, financially and emotionally, and that it mattered. There had never been a full adoption. On paper, he was my husband's kid because his name was on the birth certificate, and I was basically the long-term caregiver who paid for everything. It was a soft, within-the-family deal, which meant I carried responsibility with almost no protection. And whatever the details looked like in our state, the bottom line was that I had been treated like a parent without ever getting the safety of being one. She did not tell me to go home and think about it. She did not say, maybe you are overreacting. She asked me what I wanted. What I wanted, if I am being honest, was for time to rewind 15 years so I could slap my younger self in the face and tell her to ask more questions. Since that was not an option, I told my lawyer that I wanted out of the marriage, out of the fake mother role, out of being the one who paid for everything while being mocked in group chats. I wanted my life back, or whatever was left of it. We spent hours working through the details. She asked about the shop, the house, our savings, the life insurance policies, the college fund I had set up for my son. I answered everything like a robot, feeling more and more like I was sitting in a different version of that little room years ago. Except this time, I was not the one who had messed up. She took notes, laid out options, and then started pulling together a strategy. First step, separate my financial responsibilities from the boy as cleanly and quickly as possible. Thankfully, I had most of the shop's financial records already organized from our last tax filing, which gave my lawyer a head start. That meant an official valuation of the shop, since my husband and I technically co-owned it, even though I worked more hours there than he did. It meant canceling the automatic transfers that went to my son's private school and his little college savings account every month. It meant documenting everything I had paid for over the years, not because I would get it all back, but because it painted a very clear picture of who had actually been parenting. Second step, file for separation and clear up the fact that there had never been a legal adoption. That last part was key. Without papers, without a judge's signature from back then, I was legally just the woman who had taken care of someone else's child. It felt like a punch to admit that out loud, but it also meant I did not owe him anything going forward except whatever I chose. My lawyer drafted a petition that laid out the fraudulent arrangement, the deception, the emotional and financial damage. She drew clean lines between biological parents and informal caregiver, which is a cold phrase for the idiot who thought love was enough. Third step, make sure my exit was not just me walking out with a suitcase and hoping for the best. I was not 20 anymore. I had a business, a mortgage, years of sweat poured into a life that might have been built on lies, but was still mine in some ways. She helped me figure out what would be a fair settlement that did not tie me to them forever. No drawn-out fight over the shop, no secret promises in back rooms. Just a check, paper signed, clean break. All of this happened in the 2 weeks before the party. During the day, I went to work like normal. I balanced invoices, answered customers, argued with suppliers, and pretended my face had not gone numb. In the evenings, I went home, cooked dinner, asked my son about his day, reminded him about homework, and stared at his profile while he scrolled on his phone at the table, wondering how long he had been planning his escape with them. At night, after everyone was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and my lawyer's emails, reading and rereading words like petition, fraud, separation, and paperwork confirming I had no legal parental rights or obligations going forward, because there had never been an adoption until the letters blurred. I signed things electronically. I scanned old documents I had kept in a shoebox. I printed out bank statements and marked them up with highlighter until the pages looked like they had been attacked by a rainbow. Whenever my husband asked how the party planning was going, I smiled and said something vague about the slideshow taking longer than I thought. He would laugh and make some comment about how I always went overboard, how I could not do anything halfway. My cousin texted me at one point to say she was so excited and could not wait to celebrate him, and I stared at her name on my screen for a full minute before replying with a neutral thumbs up. Inside, the anger grew teeth. If you are wondering why I went through with the party at all, why I did not just cancel everything and blow their world up in private, I get it. I have asked myself the same thing. The only answer I have is that there is a cruel little part of me that needed them to see, publicly, what they had done. For 15 years, I had given them everything in quiet. For once, I wanted their shame to be loud. The day of the party was clear and too bright, the kind of blue sky that feels like an insult when your life is falling apart. The venue was a rented hall on the edge of town, decorated in the colors my son had picked out. There were balloons, fairy lights, a buffet table that cost more than my first car, and a DJ setting up speakers in the corner. My son strutted around in his new shirt and carefully chosen shoes, acting slightly annoyed and secretly thrilled, like every teenage boy pretending he is too cool to care. Relatives filtered in, carrying gift bags and desserts, kissing my cheeks, telling me how grown up my son looked, how proud I must be. My husband made jokes, clapped people on the back, shook hands, and he kept touching my shoulder like we were still the team I had always thought we were. My cousin swept in late, of course, in a dress that screamed, "Look at me," and a smile that was a little too wide. She hugged my son first and me second. The slideshow was scheduled for halfway through the night, right after the dance. I had requested a specific song, one my son used to ask me to play on repeat when he was little. Back then, he would climb onto my lap and lean his head on my shoulder, sticky hands and all, and I would sway with him in the living room and think, this is it. This is what motherhood feels like. I thought I was building something permanent. When the DJ announced it was time for the dance, my son rolled his eyes in the exact way I expected. But he did not argue. He took my hand. We walked onto the dance floor. People clapped, some aunt sniffled. Someone recorded on their phone from the corner. The song started, and for a minute, despite everything, I almost broke. I almost let myself just feel the memory instead of the betrayal. He kept a careful distance, one arm around my waist, one hand holding mine, eyes staring somewhere over my shoulder. I swallowed hard, forced myself to meet his gaze anyway, and started talking quietly into his ear, the way mothers do in sentimental moments. "I hope you enjoy the slideshow," I said. He shrugged, mumbled something about it being embarrassing, standard teenager stuff. I smiled even though my jaw was so tight it hurt. When the song ended, we stepped apart, and the DJ asked everyone to take their seats for a special presentation. I had exported the whole thing as a timed slideshow on my tablet, cued it to auto-advance, and told the DJ not to touch anything until it finished, so nobody could skip what I needed people to see. My lawyer had told me not to add any commentary, just to put up what they had written and let people read. The lights dimmed. The first image on the projector was exactly what everyone expected. My son as a baby in a ridiculous hat, my cousin and I on the couch, my husband in the background making a silly face. People cooed. The second slide was my son as a toddler covered in frosting. The third was him on his first day of school, too serious for his tiny backpack. Laughter, little comments, nostalgia humming like low music. The fourth slide was a screenshot. It took a second for people to process what they were looking at. The text was big, white letters on a dark background, blown up so even the people in the back could read it. At first, there was just confusion. Then the words landed. "Cannot wait to move in with my real parents," my son had typed. "She is just an expensive babysitter who pays for everything. You know that sound a room makes when all the air gets sucked out at once? It is not actually silent. There is a whole layer of tiny noises. A fork clinking, a chair scraping, someone's breath catching. All of that happened at once. I watched my son's face go from bored to confused to horrified in slow motion as the next slide came up with my cousin's reply about how one day this will all be behind us, and you will finally have the life you deserve with your real family. The slides flipped automatically, one after another, each one a new blow. My husband telling my cousin that he felt bad sometimes watching her act like his mom, my cousin talking about me like I was a temporary employee, the two of them joking about how at least she pays for the private school. There were messages about keeping the truth from her a little longer, about waiting until he is old enough to choose, about not wanting to ruin her life yet. My cousin shot up from her chair, shouting something about a mistake, her hands flailing. My husband stood white as the tablecloths, eyes locked on the screen. My son looked at me, then at them, then at the tablet in my hand because, yes, I was holding it like a little remote control. I took the microphone from the DJ. My voice sounded calm, almost bored, which is funny, because I have never been more awake in my life. "So," I said, "since we are all here to celebrate, I thought it would be a good time to share what my family has actually been celebrating behind my back." There was a murmur. Someone whispered my name like a warning. I ignored it. I found these messages a couple of weeks ago when I took the tablet in to be repaired for this party. Turns out the tablet I have been using to store baby pictures was also the device my husband and my cousin used to talk about me like I am a credit card with legs. Fun, right? My husband started walking toward me, hands up like he was approaching a wild animal. My cousin was already in tears, saying my name over and over, asking me to stop, that this was not the time. I held up my hand. "For 15 years, I said. "I have raised this boy. I have been the one at the school meetings, at the doctor appointments, at the shop late at night trying to make sure we had enough for his tuition and his sneakers and his hobbies. I did that because I thought I was his mother. I knew I did not give birth to him, but I thought I was chosen to be his mother." I glanced at my cousin. Apparently, I was chosen to be the babysitter until they felt like stepping in. Gasps, someone saying, "Oh my God," a chair tipping over. My son looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I will not be doing that anymore, I continued. As of this week, my lawyer has filed for separation. She also filed to legally clarify that I was not and would not be treated as his guardian in any official way. There was never a legal adoption, just a nice little family arrangement that worked really well for everyone who was not me. That means that, as far as the law in our state is concerned from this point forward, I do not owe anyone here another cent for a child who has made it very clear I was nothing more than temporary help with financial obligations. My grandmother, sitting near the front with the tissue in her hand, started to cry openly. I forced myself not to look at her for more than a second. If I did, I might stop. I paid for this party, I said, every last bit of it. Consider it my final contribution. Starting Monday, any costs for this young man that my lawyer says are no longer my responsibility will be handled by his parents. The biological ones. The ones who have been directing his loyalty behind my back all this time. I looked directly at my cousin. You can pick up your son at my house on Monday, I said. Bring whatever paperwork you want. I am done. Then I put the microphone down, turned off the projector, and walked out of the hall. People called my name. My husband grabbed for my arm and missed. My son shouted something that sounded a lot like, "Wait," but I did not. I lifted my chin, walked past the buffet tables and the balloon arch and the shocked faces, stepped out into the parking lot, and finally let my hands shake. You would think that would be the end, right? Drop the mic, leave the party, start a new life. That is the kind of ending people like, because it is clean and dramatic. The truth is messier. You do not just walk away from a life without your past clawing at your ankles on the way out. The next months were a blur of meetings in cramped conference rooms and long emails from my lawyer that I had to read 3 times to fully understand. My husband tried calling, texting, showing up at the shop. For the first week after the party, he camped out in his car outside my mother's place, like I was going to suddenly step out with a suitcase and sigh and forgive him because he looked pitiful. I did not. In mediation, he showed up with a different lawyer, one I had never seen before. A polished woman who tried to spin the whole situation as a misunderstanding between family members. My lawyer shut that down so fast it almost made me like her more. There is no legal adoption, she repeated, again and again, like a drumbeat. My client has been the sole provider for this child for 15 years under false pretenses. She has carried responsibilities that do not belong to her. Going forward, the legal and financial burden needs to shift to the people who actually chose to bring him into the world. The mediator was one of those people who looked like she had seen every kind of family disaster and was not impressed by much. She listened, flipped through the screenshots, the bank statements, the timeline. She asked my husband and my cousin a few very pointed questions about when exactly they had decided to tell my son the truth, why they had kept it from me, why they had never formalized anything. Their answers were full of phrases like, "We did not want to hurt her," and "It was complicated," and "We thought it was for the best." The mediator raised an eyebrow. At best, she said, this was avoidance. At worst, it was exploitation. That word sat in the air like smoke. In the end, the agreement that came out of those meetings was not dramatic, just specific. On paper, he stayed their child, not mine. We signed a basic separation agreement that turned 15 years into numbers and dates, made it clear I had no ongoing obligations for a kid who was never legally mine, and put the entire old shop in his column while I walked away with my share in cash. My lawyer said we had enough in texts and bank records to at least try dragging this into civil court if we wanted, which gave us leverage without needing a big courtroom scene. My cousin started quietly sending repayment money for some of the school costs instead of finding out what a judge would say. And in a small church circle, people notice when the generous pastor cousin suddenly looks very tired and very quiet. Signing the final papers felt anticlimactic. 1 minute I was married and technically someone's mother. The next minute, on paper, I was not. My son did not reach out. He moved in with my husband and my cousin, just like he had said he wanted. They enrolled him in a different school. I heard through relatives that he was telling people I had abandoned him at his own party. There was always going to be a version of the story where I was the villain. I had stopped caring about that the night I walked out of the hall. After the legal dust settled, I realized I could not stay in that town. Every grocery store aisle, every street corner, every gas station held some memory of the boy I had raised and the man I had slept next to for half my life. I kept running into people who would tilt their head and ask gently how I was holding up, which is code for, "Tell me the gossip." I did not owe them my grief. So I sold the house, finished untangling the business, packed what was left of my life into boxes, left the old shop with my ex, and moved to a little rainy town in another state where no one knew my name. The rent was lower, the air smelled different, and the shop I rented had enough space for me to start over. I put up a new sign, hired 2 teenagers to help with basic work, and threw myself into engines and oil changes like they were therapy. All of that happened in the 16 months after the party, even though it felt a lot slower while I was living it. By the time he was 18, the scandal had cooled down for everyone except me. A year or so into my new life, one of the women at the small local church I had started attending brought her brother to the shop because his car was making a weird noise. He was divorced, lived on the other side of town, and laughed at my terrible joke about car problems being like exes coming back at the worst times. We talked while I worked, him leaning against the wall with a coffee he insisted on bringing me pretending I was not noticing how easy it felt to banter with someone who did not know any of my baggage yet. He asked me out a few weeks later. I said no. Then I said maybe. Then I said yes and spent the entire date waiting for him to say something that would confirm he was secretly a terrible person. He did not. He was just regular, kind, funny, a little self-deprecating. He told me about his own divorce, about how he had ignored red flags until they were practically neon. We compared scars like veterans. When I found out I was pregnant, months into that relationship, I panicked in a way I did not know was possible. The test was still drying on the bathroom counter, and I was already spiraling. I remembered my cousin handing me a baby. I remembered my husband saying it was a gift. I remembered 15 years of loving someone who saw me as a wallet. I remembered lies layered on top of more lies. I booked an appointment at a clinic, not just for prenatal care, but for a paternity test, which is not exactly standard romantic behavior. My boyfriend, bless him, looked confused when I told him what I wanted, but he did not argue. He did not get offended. He just said, "If it gives you peace, we will do it." Sitting in that office, holding a little bag with swabs and instructions, I realized how far gone my trust issues were. I hated that I needed this. I hated that I could not just enjoy the fact that my body was doing something I had once thought it would never do. I hated that part of me was waiting for some reveal that would prove I was the punchline again. The test came back exactly like it was supposed to. The baby was his. No surprises, no twists. He cried when he found out. I cried too, mostly from relief and from the shame of having doubted something so simple. I wish I could tell you that was the moment everything softened, that my walls came down, and I floated into motherhood ready and healed. It was not, but it was a start. Our daughter was born on a rainy morning, screaming her head off, tiny fists clenched like she was already ready to fight the world. Holding her, I felt something break open and something else harden at the same time. Love, deep and fierce. Fear, deeper and fiercer. I promised her, silently, that I would never hand her over to someone who saw her as an arrangement. For a while, my life shrank to the size of our little rented house. The shop, the church, the daycare. Diapers, night feedings, invoices, therapy sessions. It was almost peaceful, in a messy, exhausting way. I let myself believe, for short stretches of time, that the life behind me was far enough away not to reach me anymore. Almost 3 years after the party, when I finally had days that did not taste like betrayal, I started to believe I was actually safe. Then my grandmother had a stroke. The call came from my mother, whose relationship with me had turned into something brittle and polite since the party. She did not say much, just that my grandmother was in the hospital, that it did not look good, that if you want to say goodbye, you should come. My first instinct was to say no. My second was to look at my daughter and realize that some goodbyes haunt you forever if you skip them. So I packed a small bag, strapped my daughter into her car seat, and drove back to the town I had tried so hard to erase. The hospital smelled like every hospital, the same weird mix of disinfectant and sadness. My grandmother looked small in the bed, swallowed by white sheets and machines. Her face lit up when she saw me, then softened when I held my daughter up for her to see. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she muttered something about my girls, and thank you. She clutched my hand with surprising strength and whispered that she had been praying we would all be together again before she died. I did not have the heart to tell her that some of us being in the same building did not mean we were together. Word got around fast that I was in town. My ex tried to approach me in the hospital hallway, but I walked right past him. Whatever he had to say could wait or not happen at all. My focus was my grandmother and getting out of that town as quickly as possible. Then, on my second day there, my boyfriend pulled me aside after I had stepped out for coffee. "Your son is in the parking lot," he said quietly, "with a baby." I felt my heart slam against my ribs. Anger, panic, something like curiosity, all tangled. My daughter was with my mother for a few hours, giving me space to process the hospital visits. I had that space now, but I was not sure I wanted to use it like this. "You don't have to see him," my boyfriend said, reading my face. "We can leave right now if you want." I looked at the hospital entrance, then back at him. 5 minutes, I said. "Outside. You stay close." The parking lot was too bright, the sun bouncing off cars and windows. My son was leaning against a car near the entrance, a baby carrier at his feet. He looked older, obviously, but not as much as I expected. There were dark circles under his eyes. His jaw clenched in a way I recognized from his father and from the mirror. When he saw me, his face went through about 6 expressions in 3 seconds. Shock, guilt, hope, something I could not name. "Hi," he said, like we were two acquaintances bumping into each other at the grocery store. The baby fussed, kicking little feet, cheeks round and flushed. My daughter squirmed, suddenly fascinated by this smaller human. We stood there in the stale heat of the parking lot, 4 generations of bad decisions and unresolved feelings. No one spoke. Finally, because silence has never been my friend, I broke it. "You look tired," I said. He laughed softly, bitter. "So do you." 5 minutes turned into 10. He stumbled through an apology that was more about his own confusion than my pain. He said he had been angry, that everyone had told him a version of the story where I was selfish and dramatic and dangerous. He said he thought living with them would fix the hole in his chest, but it did not. He said he did not remember half of what he had typed that night into his tablet, that he had just been venting, that he never thought I would see it. That last part made me laugh again. "That is the thing about cheap electronics," I said. "They have a nasty habit of telling the truth when they are not supposed to." I did not forgive him under that stretch of sun. I did not hug him. I did not touch the baby. When the parking lot attendant made a circuit past us, glancing over like he was checking we were not about to start a fight, I pulled a pen out of my pocket, grabbed a receipt from my bag, and wrote down one thing: an email address. "If you want to talk," I said, "you can use this. No calls, no showing up where I live, no surprises. You write. You think about what you want to say. Maybe I will read it, maybe I will not. That is all I can offer." He took the paper like it was something fragile. He nodded, eyes shiny. "I am sorry," he said. "I know," I replied. "I just do not know what that changes yet." Back in my rented house in the rainy town, the emails started. At first they were short, awkward, like messages from a stranger who had accidentally landed in my inbox. Little updates about the baby's weight, about his job moving boxes in a warehouse, about his arguments with my cousin and my ex. There were blurry photos attached sometimes, my grandson's cheeks pressed against his shoulder, the girl smiling tiredly behind them. My grandmother, even from her hospital bed, somehow heard about that parking lot meeting. Over the next few months, as she slowly recovered enough to return home, she started calling me once a week, her voice still weak, urging me to talk to your son, to forgive before it is too late. I listened, let her words wash over me like static, then changed the subject to my daughter's milestones. The email that broke the pattern came a few months later. It was longer than the others, blocks of text instead of 2 lines and a picture. "What do you want?" I had written in a moment of frustration. Specifically, from me. And why? His reply did not come overnight. It took 2 days. When it landed in my inbox, my heart rate jumped in that annoying way it does when trauma and curiosity link arms. I opened it and started reading. He wrote about being 13 and my cousin sitting him down at her kitchen table, telling him that I was not his real mom, that she had given birth to him, that she had made the hard choice to let me raise him because she knew I was better with responsibilities. He wrote about how she said I knew all of this, that I had agreed from the beginning, that I always understood my role as temporary. He wrote about my husband joining that narrative, saying things like, "She does not need to know everything and she is doing her duty," which made it sound like I was some kind of volunteer. He wrote about how, after that conversation, every time I tried to hug him or make him do chores or set boundaries, it felt to him like tyranny from someone who was not entitled to it. He wrote that they had told him I had a temper, that I had a record, that I could get violent, if pushed. They had taken one stupid night in my 20s and turned it into a ghost story to scare him into keeping distance from me. He wrote that after the party, the story in the family changed again. Suddenly, I was crazy, unhinged, vindictive. They said I had humiliated them all, that I had ruined his birthday, that I had abandoned him. They told him I had not loved him. Not really. Or I would not have walked out. Reading that hurt in a way I did not have words for. I knew it had happened in abstract. Seeing it typed out, seeing the impact it had on his brain was something else. He wrote that living with my husband and my cousin had been nothing like he imagined. They fought. All the time. They resented each other. Resented him, resented me. My cousin did not know how to handle a teenage boy who was angry and lost. My husband drank more, slept less, withdrew into himself. He wrote about nights where he would lie awake in a strange bedroom, scrolling through old pictures and wondering if he had misjudged everything. He wrote about meeting his girlfriend, who came from her own mess of a family, and how they had clung to each other like lifeboats. He wrote about the moment they decided to keep the baby and the way fear and joy tangled. He wrote that he had told her about me, about the woman who had raised him, about the party. She had apparently called me a hero and a disaster in the same breath. He ended the email by saying he did not know exactly what he wanted from me, only that the idea of me being gone forever made something in him panic. He said he missed the way I used to make pancakes shaped like letters on weekends. He said he missed my terrible singing in the car. He said he hated the way he had talked about me in those messages, and that every time he thought about me reading them, he wanted to crawl out of his skin. He ended with something that made my throat tight. They had given his son my name as a middle name. His girlfriend's idea, apparently. She had grown up hearing stories about me from distant relatives, about the woman who took in a baby that wasn't hers and worked herself to the bone. She wanted to honor that, he said, even if I could not. I read it twice, then a third time. My therapist later would say that what he was offering was not a neat apology. It was a messy, incomplete attempt at honesty, which is sometimes all people like us get. I wrote back with rules. If he wanted me in his life, it would be on my terms. We would start small. Email only. No surprise visits. No guilt trips. If he ever forwarded my messages to anyone else, if my cousin or my ex tried to use our contact as another lever, I would cut it off. And if he wanted more than superficial exchanges, he would have to sit in a room with me and a professional and hear in detail what his choices had done to me. He agreed. The first time he flew out to see me, it felt surreal. I picked him up at the airport, my daughter in the back seat babbling about clouds. When he walked through the arrivals gate, my body reacted before my brain did. Every piece of me remembered holding him as a baby, watching him sleep, bandaging scraped knees. He stepped forward like he was going to hug me, and I held out my hand instead. "Hi," I said. "Welcome." He took my hand, squeezed it, his eyes searching my face for something I did not know how to give. We drove back to my town mostly in silence, my daughter filling the gaps with commentary about everything out the window. At one point, he laughed at something she said, and I felt my heart twist. The visit was awkward and careful. I gave him the guest room. I cooked meals I knew he used to like, then second-guessed myself and burned one of them. We went to the park with his son and my daughter, the two kids playing in the grass while we sat on a bench like strangers who had been forced to share custody of a memory. His girlfriend came too, shy and earnest, eyes wide as she took in my world. She pulled me aside one afternoon while the kids were napping and my boyfriend was at work. "I am sorry," she blurted, "for how they talked about you, for what happened. I know I was not there, but I have heard enough to know it was wrong." I just looked at her for a second. This young woman who had walked into the middle of our mess and somehow found enough love to try to raise a baby in it. "It is not on you to apologize," I said, "but thank you for seeing it." We went to our first joint therapy session the next day. The therapist, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone, laid out the ground rules. No yelling, no name-calling. Everyone gets to speak. Everyone listens. He started, voice shaking as he tried to explain the messages, the anger, the way he had bought into their narrative about who his real family was, because it gave him a sense of belonging he thought he was missing. I listened. When it was my turn, I did not hold back. I told him about the night with the tablet, about the slideshow, about the way my chest felt like it had been hollowed out. I told him about packing up his room, about seeing his baby photos and wanting to smash every frame. When I got to the part about those messages, about being reduced to a paycheck with legs, my voice cracked. He cried openly, covering his face with his hands. "I did not mean it," he said. "I was trying to hurt you, because it hurt to think you might not want me if you knew the truth." The therapist jumped on that, pulling the thread of fear and twisting it into something we could both examine. It did not fix 15 years of damage, but it put a dent in the wall between us. Our relationship from that point forward was fragile. That is the best word. We set up regular calls, always scheduled, never spontaneous. He visited when he could afford the flight, bringing his son, letting him climb on my lap carefully, like we were all afraid something would shatter if we moved too fast. My daughter accepted this new cousin as just another kid to share toys with. Kids are forgiving in ways adults are not. My ex tried to insert himself into that new structure a few times. He emailed me once, a rambling message about therapy and regret and wanting closure. I ignored it. He called during one of my son's visits, his name flashing on my son's phone screen like a bad memory. My son looked at me, hand hovering over the answer button. "Your choice," I said. He answered, listened for about 30 seconds, then hung up and put the phone face down. "Not today," he muttered. The universe, of course, was not done testing whatever boundaries I thought I had set. My grandmother's health took another turn, and this time, she did not make it. I went back for the funeral, my boyfriend at my side, my daughter clutching my hand in a dress that itched. The church was full of familiar faces, most of them arranged in little clusters that broke apart when I walked by. Grief and gossip make a weird pair. I felt eyes on me as I slipped into a pew near the back. Some people nodded politely, others looked away. I heard my name whispered more than once, usually followed by the party or her son. My son was there, of course, sitting with his girlfriend and their baby, my ex on the other side of them, my cousin a few rows ahead, shoulders hunched, hair thinner, skin sallow. The air between our rows felt charged. During the service, the pastor talked about forgiveness and family, and the way old wounds can poison new generations if we let them. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. It is always easier to talk about forgiveness when you are not the one who got gutted. My mother sat in the front row with other relatives, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, her posture rigid. She had looked at me once when I walked in, a flicker of something, regret, maybe, or just discomfort, before turning back to face forward. Whatever bridge had existed between us after the party had burned to ash, when I refused to play nice at family gatherings and pretend everything was fine, she had chosen her side quietly, and it was not mine. That was fine. I had stopped needing her approval years ago. At the graveside, someone behind me murmured, just loud enough for the people around them to hear, "She died with her family all broken like this. Heartbreak kills, you know." My son heard it. I saw his shoulders tense, his jaw clenched. He glanced at me, then at the patch of dirt that was about to cover his great-grandmother. Tears filled his eyes. And for once, they were not just about his own pain. After the official part ended and people started drifting toward their cars, he approached me. "Can we stay a minute?" he asked. We stood side by side in front of the grave, the fresh flowers already starting to sag in the heat. My boyfriend hung back with the kids, giving us space. The wind kicked up, rustling the trees overhead. "I hate that she did not see us fixed," he said quietly. I almost said, "We are not broken," but that would have been a lie. We were broken. We were just trying to figure out how to live with the cracks. "She saw you," I said instead. "She saw your son. She saw me holding my daughter. Maybe that is enough." He reached for my hand, slowly, like he was afraid I would pull away. I let him take it. His grip was tentative, not the easy, thoughtless hold of a child grabbing a mother's hand crossing the street, but a careful touch, like he was picking up something that could cut him if he squeezed too hard. It was not forgiveness. It was not a cinematic reconciliation. It was a truce in a quiet corner of a cemetery on a too-bright day. Life kept moving, because it always does. A few months later, my cousin sent me a letter, a real one on paper, with my name written in a shaky hand. I saw the return address, a medical facility, and my stomach twisted. I opened it at the kitchen table, my daughter coloring beside me, my boyfriend reading the news on his phone. The letter was exactly what you think it was. She was sick, very sick. She said the doctors did not know how much time she had. She wrote about wanting to set things right before she died. She asked to see me, to apologize in person, to explain. I read the first few lines, felt my chest tighten, then folded the letter back up and dropped it in the trash. My boyfriend watched, eyebrows raised. "You are not even going to read it?" he asked gently. "No," I said. "I know what it says. I do not need her version. I lived it." The calls started soon after. My son, my ex, even my mother, all in their own ways, suggesting that maybe I should go see her, that it might help with closure, that it would be the right thing to do. I listened, counted to 10 in my head, and repeated the same sentence. "I will think about it." For weeks, I did not. Then one night, sitting on the edge of my bed after putting my daughter to sleep, images of my cousin kept flickering through my mind. Not just the party, Not just the messages. Older memories of us as teenagers, of shared secrets, of her jealousy when I got a job, when I bought my first car, when I got married. I realized that if I did not go see her, it would not be because I was protecting myself. It would be because I was still letting her dictate my choices, even from a hospital bed. So I went. Once. The hospital room was dim, the blinds half closed, the air thick and warm in that oppressive way medical facilities always are. She was propped up slightly against pillows, tubes snaking from both arms, her skin almost translucent against the white sheets. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears immediately. "Corinne," she whispered. "Thank you for coming." I sat in the chair by the bed, not too close, hands folded in my lap to stop them from shaking. She launched into it immediately, words tumbling out about being jealous since we were little, about my wedding, about the baby being a way to... I held up my hand. She stopped mid-sentence, eyes wide. "I know all of this," I said, voice flat. "I read the messages, remember? I lived through it. I don't need the director's cut." She tried to continue. Something about loving me, about doing what she thought was... "Stop," I said again. "You're not doing this for me. You're doing it so you can die feeling like you tried. I'm not interested in being your confession booth." Tears streamed down her face. She reached for my hand. I didn't move it closer. "I needed you to know I regret it," she whispered. "I needed you to know I love you." I sat there for a long second, letting silence settle between us. "I hear you," I said. "I believe you regret it. I believe you loved me in your own way. None of that changes what you did." Her face crumpled. "I do not have forgiveness to give you," I continued. "I am not holding on to this because I like being angry. I am holding on to it because it shaped everything. It wrecked pieces of me I am still trying to rebuild. You do not get to do that and then ask me to make you feel better on your way out," she sobbed. I stood up. "I hope you find whatever peace you are looking for," I said. "Really, I just will not be the one to hand it to you." Then I left. I did not go back. She died a few weeks later. I did not go to the funeral. My son did, out of some combination of obligation and complicated love. He called me afterward, voice thick, saying it had been a small service, that there had been more empty chairs than full ones. He said seeing the casket lowered had made him feel like part of his childhood was being buried with it. "Not the part with me," I said quietly. "That part is still here. Messy as hell, but here." He sniffed, tried to laugh. "Yeah," he said. "Messy as hell." A few months after my cousin's funeral, long after the flowers on her grave had wilted and been replaced twice over, my ex reached out, asking to meet just once more. Against my better judgment, I agreed, mostly because I was tired of wondering what else he could possibly say. We met at a coffee shop in a town halfway between ours. It was neutral ground, a place where no one knew our history. He looked older than the last time I had seen him, lines carved deep into his face, fingers fidgeting with a paper cup. He started talking before I even sat down. He told me everything I already knew and a few details I did not. He told me that my cousin had come on to him when I was distracted, that he had used my absence and chaos as an excuse to cross a line he had always wanted to cross. He told me he had felt guilty, then furious at himself, then resentful toward me for making him feel that way, which is a wild mental gymnastics routine if you think about it. He said that when my cousin got pregnant, they both panicked. They told themselves I would be a better mother, that I would forgive him eventually, that leaving me in the dark was kinder. They layered lie on top of lie until they did not know how to get out from under them. He admitted that every time I had celebrated a milestone with our son, he had felt like a thief watching the rightful owner play with stolen goods. He cried, a lot. He asked for forgiveness without using the word, which somehow made it worse. He said he wanted me to be happy, that he hoped I found peace, that he would carry what he had done for the rest of his life. I listened. I drank my coffee. When he finally ran out of words, I put my cup down carefully. "You are right," I said. "You will carry it. That is how this works. You do not get to drop it on me and walk away lighter." He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I am not going to tell you I forgive you," I said, "because I do not. Maybe one day I will stop caring enough for it to matter. But right now, I am still angry. I am allowed to be." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "You do not deserve forgiveness," I finished, "but I do deserve a life that is not defined by what you did. So I am going to go live it now." I stood up, threw my empty cup away, and walked out. I did not look back. If he cried in that booth until the barista started wiping down the tables around him, that was his business. In the 2 years since I walked out of that coffee shop and told my ex I was done carrying his guilt, my life has settled into something solid. There is no soft focus montage of family dinners and group hugs. What there is solid. My shop is busy. My daughter is in preschool, coming home with paint on her clothes and wild stories about who stole whose crayons. My boyfriend, now my husband, kisses me goodbye every morning and hello every evening like it never got old. My son and I talk regularly in our structured, slightly awkward way. He visits a few times a year, always with his son, sometimes with his girlfriend. We have boundaries. He does not call me mom. I asked him not to, and he respected that, even though I know it stung. He introduces me as, "This is Corinne, the woman who raised me," which is not perfect, but it is honest. I have learned to live with honest imperfection. I love my grandson in a way that surprises me. He toddles into my shop, hands outstretched, leaving sticky fingerprints on everything, and something in my chest softens. He does not know any of the history. To him, I am just the lady who lets him play with empty boxes and gives him cookies when his parents are not looking. I am determined to keep it that simple for as long as possible. Sometimes I still wake up sweating, replaying that slideshow in my head and hearing old voices that make my chest hurt. On those nights, I hate all of them all over again, like it just happened. But most days now, I do not think about them at all. My life is school drop-offs, annoying customers, and arguing about vegetables at dinner, not constant flashbacks to a slideshow in a rented hall. Weeks go by where I am just the woman at the shop, not the one who blew up a birthday party. My mother and I stay in that polite, arm's-length version of a relationship, and that is fine. I do not need a movie ending or a perfect apology. I have a roof I paid for, a family I chose, and a spine I did not have before. And for me, that is enough. People love to talk about forgiveness like it is the point. For me, it was not. I needed boundaries, time, and a life that was mine again. That is enough. Just me, Corinne, the version that walked out of that coffee shop, that held her daughter for the first time, that let her son hold her hand at a grave, that stood in a hospital room and refused to hand forgiveness to someone who had not earned it. That version is the one I am getting to know now. She is not perfect. She is impulsive and stubborn and still way too quick to assume the worst. She overthinks every email and sometimes picks fights just to make sure people will stick around when things get ugly. But she is real. She is honest. And she is never, ever going to be anyone's babysitter again.